How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of the Barely There podcast. Be sure to follow the podcast at Barely There Pod on Twitter. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like button if you like what you're hearing. I'm Duke Coughlin. Follow me at that pod guy Duke on Twitter. As always, I'm joined by Lucas Perfetti at Lucas Perfetti 46. Merry Christmas, a late Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever holiday you celebrate. We're happy for you. We're happy. We're happy to see you celebrate. We're happy to see you spend time with your family. Hopefully, you're eating some great food. We have New Year's Eve coming up tomorrow night. Hope everybody's been enjoying themselves. I know I've enjoyed plenty of the prime rib, plenty of the liquid apple pie, if you know what I mean. I'm sure Lucas Perfetti has also been enjoying plenty of food because we all know the man loves food, as we all do, as I do as well. But Lucas, we're kind of hitting that point, and I know you've experienced plenty of these with me, even before I knew you. But it's that year, in a down year for the Chicago Bears. You have a new regimen, you have the first-year head coach, the roster's depleted, and we're in late December, and we're just kind of looking at draft capital at this point. You know what I mean? It's one of these situations where it's so unfortunate because, like, I know you get into the games just as much as I do. You know, we're definitely different people than the normal everyday person kind of watching a football game. We kind of get honed in, and it's really challenging around this time of the year in the season like this to kind of really buy into what's happening on Sunday because there's so much that's happening outside the scenes. There's so much that's going to be happening within the upcoming months, especially with the draft. But Lucas, anyway, before we get into all that, how are you doing, buddy? How have your holidays been? And yeah, how's it going, buddy?
Yeah, we're gravy train over here. Holidays were nice. Yeah, I mean, dude, everything was good. Everything was chill, super chill. I think as you get older, you just kind of like now it's about the kids, right? All the grandkids and stuff like that. So, yeah, just chilled out, hung out, watched football. That was actually a nice surprise having Christmas Eve, having football all day, and then Christmas Day as well. So, watched a ton of football. But yeah, like you said, it's a rough season. I think this one's particularly rough too because I mean, the Bears are on an 8-game losing streak, and it looks like they're going to finish the year losing 10 games, and they're a 3-win team. So, you kind of go into this year, and I think even you and I and a lot of Bears fans expected them to be like a 7, 8, 6-win team, right? Like, we didn't think they were going to be this bad. And, some of those games, especially, it felt like they were in the grasp of being a victory, right? Like a lot of those games were so close, which is great. Because you look at a team like the Minnesota Vikings that I think have only lost 2 games or maybe one only, 3. I'm not sure, but either way, they're on the right side of all those 1-score games. So it could, have you be more optimistic for the future. And you can kind of pull some things from this season, but it's been rough. But now that we're here, no reason to fucking win. No reason to fuck up and win a game in these next 2 games. I know that we've been saying on this podcast for many, many weeks, don't tank. It's not the way you want to go. Like, it's hard to get out of a really bottom feeder type of roster team morale. But we're at the point now where it's like you have gold in the second pick. And we'll talk about maybe in a few episodes here, but I think Lovie Smith's going to do us a solid and win us a game at the end of it. He got a bullshit ass contract from Houston. He's just a spot filler. It seemed like they were, looking to go make a big hire. And then they were like, nah, we'll just stick with Lovie for a year. I don't think they gave him a fair opportunity. I think he's going to do us a solid as an organization and do his absolute best to win one of these games. So the Bears can get the number 1 overall pick. But it's the Bears have to do their part too. So there's no reason to fucking win a game at this point. Absolutely no reason to win a game. Yeah, the Colts game, week 18. I mean, Jeff Saturday is just fucking giving games away. I wanted to see him do well. I thought I liked him. A lot of people were making fun of him, and I tend to side with people like that. Just because it's like, dude, see what the fuck he's got. You know what I mean? Like, why is he a martyr? He didn't do anything other than accept an interim coaching job, but he has proven to be a pretty fucking terrible head coach. So with all that being said, Bears got to do their part, and finish out the tank, right? That's our background, is this enormous fucking tank.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was really fitting. I feel like every game has been the tank bowl essentially since the trade deadline, if we're being totally honest. And I really think that's kind of the point in the season where I started kind of seeing that where we were going. Obviously early on in the year, people who would have looked at me and said that the Bears were going to win 8 games, they would have looked at me and been like, oh, well, why can't they win more? There's talent on this team. There's a lot of talent that they're carrying over. Like Matt Eberflus has these guys playing hard. Luke Getsy should have been a head coach somewhere. Like we were hearing all of it. And now like we hear a lot from the same people now where this was never the season where that was going to happen.
Well, and a big part of that too, sorry to cut you off, but it was supposed to be a weak schedule because you had the NFC East who somehow turned into the NFC Beast. Like no one saw that coming. Right now, the Bears have the highest in terms of in terms of draft order. They have the hardest strength of schedule. We thought it was going to be way lighter than last year.
Yeah, no, it's the NFC East definitely played a big part in that because the NFC East really is, as wild as it sounds, probably the best division in the NFC. Probably one of the best divisions in football right now. Like the AFC West was supposed to be that, and it fell off a fucking cliff. You know what I mean? But that's the NFL. You know what I mean? That's something you kind of have to prepare for every year. That's why Super Bowls aren't won in the off season. Like I always think of that dream team Eagles team when they signed Nnamdi Asomugha. They got like a lot of different pickups or whatever, and everybody was already convinced they already had him in the Super Bowl matched up that year, and they didn't even make the playoffs. You know what I mean? So like that's how quick these things can fall apart. Part of me did think like with this way this team was built, going to see him in camp, kind of seeing like how everybody was playing and kind of expecting like a big leap out of Justin Fields. I thought it was entirely possible we could have won 8 games. And as the season's played out and with how we've played teams, I'm still convinced we could have hit that number. But with where we are with draft capital at this point in the season, like I'm not a guy that likes to talk about tanking, and I'm not somebody that will kind of like call for it early on in the year. But it's impossible to deny the situation that it's put in front of us. Like it's very obvious at the trade deadline when we kind of started sending off pieces after really a game against the Cowboys that we hung around in, and a game against New England where we kind of really had probably our best overall performance as a team. That being the point that we started to kind of sell off assets, it kind of gave you an idea of what Ryan Poles was doing heading into the season. And it was something that me and you kind of talked about before the season started, and we were called negative and all that other shit. Is Ryan Poles kind of came in, gutted this roster, kind of gutted the team, and wanted to get the best possible draft capital he can get heading into the first round pick the Chicago Bears have had in quite a few years. So it makes a lot of sense. It sucks to see because as we're gonna start talking about with the Eagles and the Bills games, like this team, when playing with this coaching staff, with Justin Fields playing well, can kind of hang around. You know what I mean? Like it was a situation where the second half, like it showed up and it kind of showed who the more talented teams were. But like it showed that this team like firing on all cylinders, even with very lackluster talent. There's something there, you know what I mean? And that's something that's very promising heading into this offseason with that pick, because it's not a situation like the Miami Dolphins when they tanked, where it's like we're going to see a complete turnover. We haven't even drafted our franchise quarterback yet. Like we have our guy. We have some guys that play very well around him, and we have some guys on both sides of the football that can be long-term pieces. I'm not saying it's going to be a lot of them, but with the roster turnover that's going to be coming up, I think we're in a decent spot. It's just a situation where, as we've brought up plenty of times, Lucas, Ryan Poles needs to knock out this offseason. Like he needs to knock it out of the fucking park. He needs to either set us up for next year or the year after to be the year that we really make a run, or he needs to go spend some fucking money, knock it out of the park in the draft. Because if he addresses a lot of issues through free agency, then it opens up you to stay at that number 2 pick and get an absolute fucking superstar.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add about that is really, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think Jalen Johnson, it doesn't look this way if you look at AJ Brown's stats in the game against the Bears, but I thought Jalen Johnson played fucking really well against one of the best, most physical receivers in the game. And I think that's, you got to tip your cap to him. And obviously he's on IR now. Sanborn, everyone's on IR. So it's just kind of one of those things, I wanted to point it out because I thought he played really fucking well. And there were a couple big plays that came over the top where it was like great throw, great catch. But overall, I thought Jalen Johnson had a great game. And like you said, like Kyler Gordon, if anything, Brisker's kind of quieted down a little bit and Gordon's starting to take that shine. Like he's making plays, and that's kind of what you expected from him, almost a more high risk, high reward type guy. And you weren't seeing the reward at all at the beginning of the season. So, we're going to go through at the end of this season and really go through every single move, draft pick, waiver pickup, everything. And we're going to grade it, right? The Claypool trade, all of it. And we're just going to go line by line. Might be a 2-part episode. We'll see. But realistically, I just feel like, they're playing like a team that didn't just go on an 8-game losing streak, right? Like every single week, they could have won that Eagles game, very much so. Like they could have won that Eagles game for sure. The offense just kind of slowed down, but the defense has been a lot better in the last couple of weeks, right? Like they're making adjustments. You're seeing those kind of things, and I think the reality is, like maybe this was planned. Maybe Ryan Poles knew he was going to be tanking and trading down in this draft so he can recoup that second round pick. So it looks like, hey, we just got Claypool for nothing almost, right? Like maybe that was designed because, you're right. Right when we hit our peak as a team where it's like, hey, we're 1 game out of 500 or whatever it was, 2 games out of 500 after beating New England. Like we got a couple weak teams coming up. If we fucking beat the Lions head to head, now we're up against them on the standings. Like it looked like we could have been a wild card team. And then it was like, boom, boom, there goes everything. And our defense is now forcing 1 punt a game at the end of the game because the team stopped trying. Right. But overall, like, I do think there is a better culture here, but that can easily be broken if this team isn't playing to a higher standard next year, right? Like if you still have the same type of pass catchers, the same type of, if Sam Musfer's still on this fucking roster next year and somehow earns an opportunity to start or something through injury, I'll lose my fucking head. Lucas Patrick should be your priority backup at this point, right? Like you should replace center and guard because I would assume that Whitehair is going to be gone for that extra cap as well. It just, the writing almost seems like it's on the wall. Again, this is all for the offseason, but I just think, it's the culture is set. And I think there's some things you can critique about Eberflus for sure, but I think he's grown throughout this season. And I'm hoping Ryan Poles has too. Because like we said, he's got to knock it out of the park for this team to truly be competitive. If they want to find themselves in the top 5 again, all they have to do is, and that's just the way I see it. Like, especially with this, if they fill every hole or they feel like they've filled every hole and they feel like they're in a position to take Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, like in my opinion, you have to believe he's the best player in this year's draft, last year's draft, and next year's draft. Cause that's like, to me, it's like, you're not one stud, and I get it. Like you want those cornerstone pieces, but you're not one complete stud edge rusher away from being a good defense or from being a good team, right? Like, I just feel like you need to, if you have the 1 or 2 pick, right? If the Bears win a couple games here and they fuck it up, they can fall all the way down to 6 or 7. Now you don't have these quarterbacks or the allure of these quarterbacks at the top of the draft. But if you got the 1 or 2 pick and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are supposed to go 1 and 2, or Bryce Young and Will Levis, who just his stock just seems to keep rising, and I don't even like him that much. I think he's fucking, got great biceps, which is huge on the Perfetti fucking draftability board. But at the end of the day, like, if these 2 quarterbacks are like that, you can set up you got Atlanta, you got Carolina, you got a few teams there that are like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, where you can trade down, get exactly what San Francisco gave up. You can get your second rounder back from one of them. You can get fucking a pick swap and then 2 extra first rounders. Like now you have that flexibility like the Dolphins had a couple years ago, where they went from 3 and traded down to 9 or 10 and then traded back up to 6 and still collected a first round pick and got Jalen Waddle. Like, I think you're in a position to alter your franchise. And do you think that this one player at the top of the draft is so altering, like an Aaron Donald or a Von Miller type altering? Because that's the comparisons we're seeing with these 2 guys. Like, if you really think they're going to change your shit like that, then you take them, right? But otherwise, like you can change your ability to draft players in the next 2 years by fucking trading down from that spot, and not even going that far down. I'm talking go 10, 11, 12. Like you go to one of those spots, you're still going to get a top 3 wide receiver for the most part, or you're going to get a top 3 edge rusher or a top 3 defensive interior, right? Like quarterbacks are going to go wide receivers are going to go cornerbacks, which the Bears don't need to draft one this high. I think we'd all be upset. But like this edge class is pretty deep too, right? Like there's guys that are very good that get drafted at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, it doesn't always turn out where the second overall pick is the best player. Myles Garrett is more rare than anything, right? Like a lot of times that first overall pick, it's hard to live to that first or second pick. It's hard to live up to expectations when you're not a quarterback because you don't change the entire complexion of a franchise.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that could go. And I think it's really hard to gauge how we're looking at this pick right now until we see how we address our offseason and until we see how other teams address their offseason. Because obviously we're in a situation right now where Vegas, they might be blowing it up a little bit. Especially if Derek Carr is going, especially if they're going to move on from Derek Carr, which it kind of seems like they are going to do, and B, they kind of have to do if Josh McDaniels is not going to be
What's up, Jay Billis?
like with his, if that's not going to be Josh McDaniels quarterback, because obviously they're very sold in on Josh McDaniels. They kind of have to be with how much they're paying him. Like there's no way around that. And and Mark Davis is an owner who hasn't really fucking been great at paying his bills in the first place. You know, Raiders have been kind of treading water, even with that beautiful stadium. It's not like they're totally well off financially. So that's something to pay a lot of attention to. There are going to be one or two teams out there that are going to move on from their starting quarterback as well that we're not totally going to see coming, you know? And I think there's even a team like the New Orleans Saints who could potentially move into this quarterback conversation as well, because while they've built a pretty good culture on defense, they're treading water on offense pretty bad right now. You know, they thought Jameis is going to be the guy coming into the season. Andy Dalton has taken most of the snaps at quarterback. That's not sustainable. Taysom Hill has taken snaps at quarterback. That's not sustainable. And obviously Jameis has fallen out of the favor. So that's another situation that the Bears need to pay a lot of attention to, especially if the Saints are making calls about potentially going to get a quarterback. And if the Saints potentially bring back Sean Payton, because that's something that's possibly.
I don't think he goes back to the Saints, dude. I think he goes.
Well, I mean, it's something that's been kind of been hovering around lately. I mean, that's something that's kind of recent. But regardless, I guess the main point I'm trying to get in without kind of going too nuts on the Saints or Raiders is a lot can happen from now until March. And I think that's when we're going to kind of start seeing where the draft strategy is going to start to go. I'm really excited to get into this offseason episode once we get into it. I know we've already brought it up about 7 times on this episode, but it's so volatile of how quickly things can change the NFL. You know, I kind of remember that offseason where the Rams decided they were going to start being big players. You know what I mean? And they just started trading an insane amount of fucking future draft capital to get players right now. You know what I mean? Like it can happen on the flip of a switch. You know, there's a lot of teams that are kind of hovering, you know. If Seattle misses the playoffs, like what are they doing there with Pete Carroll? Are they going to stick it out with him yet? You know what I mean? Like Geno Smith, that's another conversation that they're going to have because that's a guy who's going to want to get paid, and rightfully so. You know, there's a lot of situations around the league that we can take advantage of if somebody gets kind of quarterback heavy, or even a team that has an all right quarterback right now that falls in love with the quarterback in this draft. You know, like are the Giants bringing back Daniel Jones? You know, there's so many situations where we can really maneuver this pick. And that's why if I could preach anything to Ryan Poles, I'm trying to preach a little bit of patience. Be patient. Let teams fall in love with these guys. You know what I mean? You don't need to fall in love with anybody. Do your due diligence in case you hit a point where you do fall in love with somebody. But like, let teams fall in love with these prospects. Like, let teams think about manipulating the future of their team for one of these guys, because that's how you're going to get your best return. And I really think that's going to be something where that's where we're going to get a lot of our value. Like I kind of want to see a hectic NFL offseason because that's going to bode insanely well for us because the team's going to get desperate. They're going to want that game changer immediately. You know, Detroit could still do it too, as much as, in my opinion, they should stick with Jared Goff. I think that would be the smarter play. They could be a team that could go nuts, you know, while you don't want to hand a guy.
Make a play for a quarterback too. When you think about it, like they just got they're going to get a new GM this offseason. Who knows what's going on with Steve Keim? Like a lot of things can fucking change. And to your point, like I do think that the NFL offseason has become more and more hectic. It used to be like, oh, there's one big free agent signing and then some low tier shit. You know what I mean? Like even 10, 15 years ago, it was like that. Now it's like, holy shit, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams got moved. The year before, Stephon Diggs. Like a lot of guys like big names getting fucking moved because teams are starting to try to really manipulate and go all in for a season or two for a Super Bowl, and then they have to kind of disassemble. They have to get rid of guys like Amari Cooper for fucking nothing, right? Like, so that's why another reason why I like the idea of just trading down and just accumulating picks, because then it makes it really easy to get rid of a 5th rounder for a guy like fucking Amari Cooper because a team's pressed against the cap.
Yeah, and I mean, I know we didn't want to go off season mode, but now that I'm kind of thinking about the spin zone of everything, like Tampa could blow it up. You know what I mean? Tom Brady could be moving on somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like that could be a situation where Mike Evans becomes available. The Cardinals could blow it up. You know, they're not going to blow up with Kyler. They're kind of fucking stuck with Kyler at this point. But Cliff Kingsbury is looking insanely expendable, and DeAndre Hopkins might not want to deal with something like that to the point where he gets traded for really not a bad draft picked return. I think that's something that Ryan Poles should explore as well if that comes to that. I'm a big DeAndre Hopkins guy. So like there's a lot of situations around the league where something could potentially happen, you know, like the New York Jets, man. Maybe they fall in love with a Bryce Young, you know what I mean? That's a situation because obviously Zach Wilson's on the outs, you know, Mike White. Cool. Mike White's a pretty awesome meme, and every once in a while he'll throw 3 touchdowns, but then he'll have a game where he throws 2 interceptions and basically turns into, you know, poor man's Taylor Heineke. You know, Washington, you know, Carson Wentz could get moved again. You know, there's so much in the NFL that could go crazy from now until March, April, May, that like it's gonna bode insanely well for us. You know, I like the point that you bring up, Lucas, that like we have the piece of gold. Don't sell the gold right now when it's not popular. Sell the gold when nobody else has it. You know what I mean? You're muted.
Yeah, no, you have to do it on draft day. Like you don't, you know what I mean? Unless it's someone's giving you a fucking fool's ransom like the Niners did, like that early in the offseason, you wait until draft day to get the most value out of it. When someone's like, I'm fucking worried A is going to trade up to number 3 or number 2, or like you said, Seattle, they're not sticking with Geno. Like they'd be crazy to stick with Geno. I think he's played really well this year, but he's a stopgap quarterback, and they did really well in the last draft, and they're like a good draft, and they have the capital where they're not going to have to disassemble things to get a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like they're in a really good spot to upgrade at that one position that could make them, you know, a real contender in the West again. They started off really hot and have kind of cooled down, and I think Geno Smith hasn't played nearly as well, but you know, we have seen so far. At this point, I'm sure no one disagrees with the fact that the Bears gave up way too much for Chase Claypool right at the deadline, which to me seems like a panic move. And people still are denying the fact that they gave up they got way too little in return for Roquan Smith, which, you know, we can agree to disagree there, right? But like we've seen him not get the better end of 2 trades right at the trade deadline. So you better fucking go and look and see exactly what people have gotten, right? Like if you're trading down, like I don't think people realize there's a draft value chart that is first pick is worth like 3,000, second pick is worth 2,600. It falls by like 600, and then by the end of the first round, it's at like 850. So realistically, future fucking first, like if you look at that draft value, like if you trade past 5 and don't get multiple firsts, you had a bad offseason, right? Like especially with it's different last year. Last year is a different story because no one really wanted Kenny Pickett. Malik Willis was a wild card. This is much more similar to the draft with Fields and, you know, Mac Jones and them. Like there's only 3 this time, but way more similar to that type of draft. You know, if you want to trade down one spot with Seattle and get a few mid-round picks this year and a few mid-round picks next year, and then pick fucking Jalen Carter at 3, I won't be upset. But like, you know, there's just you can't trade down too much and get taken advantage of. It almost reminds me of the scene from Draft Day when he's like, fucking get this guy on the horn. And he like trades up to pick number 7 for 3 second-round draft picks because he's a new GM. He's like, you're not gonna fuck it up. You got 3 2s now. You know, that's how I feel about, because Poles hasn't operated the best in terms of trades. It's hard. Khalil Mack is understandable, right? Robert Quinn, I think that's decent value. He got pretty good value there, but it's the least amount of value in all the trades you made. Claypool was rough, really bad. Especially but like I said, maybe it was his plan all along. Hey, we know we're not going to win these fucking games. We're going to get a top 5 pick and we're going to trade down and get that second rounder back. maybe that's been part of the plan, but who knows? Maybe maybe this quarterback class falls completely fucking off and no one wants a number 2 pick. So you have to stick and pick.
Yeah,
Now you don't pick again until pick 60. Like, and you got how many holes? So
I guess without beating a dead horse with Ryan Poles and as it comes like with the trades, um, it's it's just very obvious that he has not gotten total value. And listen, as much as Bears fans, you want to be defensive of your GM, and I get that. You know what I mean? Like all the thing people kind of get lost in whenever anybody kind of criticizes Ryan Poles is like, I understand why people like Ryan Poles. You know what I mean? And I don't necessarily hate Ryan Poles. He just does things that piss me off. You know what I mean? It's a situation where like I see how other GMs are going to look at Ryan Poles. You know what I mean? Because when the optics are that you lost a trade, other GMs are going to be like, this, if this guy's losing trades, like I want to trade with this guy because I want to win one of these trades. You know what I mean? It's a situation where like that's kind of how GMs are wired. You know, dude, look at how much John Lynch used to fucking, dance around and fucking gloat about the fact that he traded the Mitch Trubisky pick and got Solomon Thomas out of it. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of situation we run into with a lot of these GMs, man. They love getting the upper hand on each other.
yeah.
Like what's up?
I said Solomon Thomas sucked cock though.
Exactly. But like everyone remembers John Lynch after the draft being like, oh, we weren't even looking at it. We were surprised the Bears even wanted to make that trade. You know what I mean? Like GMs are into that shit. So like if Ryan Poles almost needs to kind of acknowledge that, like, all right, shit, I haven't won every trade so far because you're not going to win them all. I almost need to kind of use this to my advantage and think somebody's like fucking me where I'm actually fucking them. You know what I mean? Like this is where we're going to see the true negotiator of Ryan Poles as it goes through this whole process.
Well, and it's pretty standard too, right? Like you go look at comparable situations, and it's like look at what the Miami Dolphins got. You can see like it depending on how many spots you trade back, you need to get X amount of value. Like if you trade yourself out of the top 10 and you don't at least have 2 firsts to show for it, like I'm talking a swap this year and then an extra first rounder next year, you fucked up, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just the way it is. And I'm not saying like everything's like the draft simulators on your fucking phone that everyone's been doing for sure. Like it's not like that for sure, right? Like a team has to really want a prospect that they're worried someone else is going to get. But I think we're going to be in that situation with the number 2 pick. And I think you're going to be able to, at a minimum, right, like get an extra first rounder out of it. If he moves down past the top 10 and he doesn't have a second first rounder next year, or like a 2, 3, and 4 next year, and this year second or something like that, we got a fucking problem, right? Like you need to, because like I said, there's a certain value assessed, and right now 2,600, you trade down from 2,600 to like the 10th pick, it goes down to like 14 or 1,600, you're talking about a first rounder, second rounder, and a third rounder, right? Like a lot of value there. Because by the time you get to the second and third round, and this is a fucking chart that GMs use. This is not like, like some made up shit from some blogger. Like this is something that I believe was created by, I know it was perfected by Bill Belichick, but it was created by someone else. I'm not 100% sure, but it's like, it's just the way it is, dude. And you'll see if you go look through all the trades in the history, like you'll be able to match those picks up and see that there's the value is there, right? Sometimes teams really want a player, so they're willing to go above and beyond and give up way too much. But for the most part, it's kind of right on par with that chart. And it's just, yeah, dude, it's there. Like now, if you trade from 2 to 5 and only pick up an extra first rounder because whatever, and then you get a second rounder or something, that's fine. Because then you still are in line to get someone like Jalen Carter. Right? Like you're still in line to get someone, like kid from Texas Tech. I know is supposed to be pretty good, but I think they run a 3-4. I'm not fully into draft, but
yeah, no, I mean, and there's still so much to go on with the draft before we can really dive too far into it. So I guess kind of changing courses a little bit, Lucas, because this is something I was talking to you about before the show started. Because I know there's been some discussion about especially from guys, who really bought into Ryan Poles about Matt Eberflus, because I feel like Matt Eberflus has gotten quite a bit of blame for the season going the way that it has.
What?
And you know what? If somebody wants to make a compelling argument about that, like I'm certainly willing to listen, like I'm a guy early on who was like, dude, I'm pounding the Eberflus. I think this is a guy, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's just something that I kind of like about him. And I think he's somebody that's kind of trying to build a culture with what he's doing. But I can acknowledge that the Matt Eberflus project so far has not been perfect. But what I will say, just looking broadly across the entire season and watching a lot of Bears football throughout my life, I can tell when guys are bought in and I can tell when they're not. I can tell, like, even in like year one of the Trestman era when we went 8-8, like something still felt off with that season. Like we were all excited heading into the next year, but something still felt like, is there something going on with this team? Like, is everyone on the same page? You know, is everybody like playing hard? Kind of had a situation where like some, personalities started getting in the way of what was happening. I think you even saw it a little bit towards, even towards the end of the John Fox era. I think you saw some guys kind of, check out. And, obviously we saw it quite a bit in the Matt Nagy era after year one, where it was there's a lot of check out. And even in year one, there was still some questions about what was firing on if everything was firing on all cylinders, especially on the offensive side of the football. And a lot of the things you heard in the locker room. I guess Trey Burton would be the first one that would come off hand with something like that. But one thing I see with this team, it doesn't matter if it's our our original starter at the position. It doesn't matter if it's our practice squad rookie that we have playing out of position. It doesn't matter if it's a guy that's undrafted like Jack Sanborn or a guy like Nicholas Moreau, who was supposed to come in on a 1-year deal and like kind of prove like who he was. Like, or I don't know if Nicholas Moreau was on a 1-year deal, but he was kind of given like that prove it type deal. Yeah. You know what I mean? At no point, and I'm not saying it's always turned out well, and I'm not saying like everyone's been playing great, because that obviously has not been the case, but like I have not had any doubt about anyone's like hustle or anyone's like buy-in of the system this entire season. Like there has not been a situation during the season where I've seen a player dog it. And that's crazy. Like, honestly, like when you stop and think about it, and if you've been a Bears fan long enough and you've watched enough of these different regiments and different head coaches, to not see a single guy just kind of check out the entire year tells you that there's something right going on in the locker room, something very right. Like I always make the comment that, the best coaches make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And, I can't necessarily say that we've made chicken salad, but at the same time, have we really been given, has Matt Eberflus and Matt Williams been given the roster to even take a chance to make chicken salad? You know what I mean? Like it's been bad. Every time we kind of have a player performing well, they'll either A, get injured, B, get shut down for the season, or 3, traded. If we're being totally honest, that's kind of how it's gone. We had a guy like Roquan Smith who was playing great at the beginning of the year. Obvious, that there was contract issues, but I don't think there was any doubt that he was bought into the system, and you kind of saw it really flourish as the season went on. Once he kind of starts hitting his stride, that's when he gets traded. That's a situation that's really insurmountable for a defensive coach, man, to lose kind of your captain on defense, to lose your play caller on defense. That's a big deal.
Back-to-back weeks, man.
Like it's a situation where like, and then you have a guy like Jack Sanborn who comes in and he's playing out of his fucking mind, if we're being totally honest. Like I love Jack Sanborn, like have his autograph sitting here that I'm going to get framed. I have owned the first Chicago Bears Jack Sanborn jersey ever made, but like the fact that he's played as well as he has in this system, just kind of being thrown in, is really impressive in its own right as well. Like there's a lot of things to criticize Matt Eberflus about. All his game time decisions haven't been perfect, and it seems like sometimes he kind of hovers to one side of the football or another. And I think he gives Luke Getsy a little bit too much freedom on the offensive side of the football, if I'm being honest. But I think when you see him and you see Alan Williams kind of work with what they have, I think they're really kind of showing what they can do if they are giving some fucking pieces. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you really give these guys some fucking toys to play with, you really kind of give these guys some dogs. You look at Eddie Jackson, who was having just pretty middling seasons the last few years, and if he stays healthy, I'm convinced he's one of the best safeties in football this year with how he was playing. You know what I mean? You have a guy like Jaquan Brisker who jumps straight from the college game, who I loved, who looks like a seasoned vet. Even with him being quiet, to a point, it's kind of nice having your safety be quiet, because if you're talking about your safety a lot, either, he's making highlight plays or he's just getting gashed. You know what I mean? So it's a situation where like you have a guy like Kyler Gordon who looked like shit early on, and it would have been very easy for Kyler Gordon to kind of sell out a little bit, you know what I mean? But he's only gotten better as the season's gone on. You have a guy like Jalen Jones. You have a lot of guys who every time they're in that game, man, they're firing on all cylinders. I'm not saying it works. I'm not saying they always do the right thing, but you have a lot of guys who have bought into this system. And I feel like that was one of the biggest things coming into this year that we were worried about. You know, even a guy like Jalen Johnson, they talked about Jalen Johnson potentially not buying into the hit system. Jalen Johnson's bought into the fucking hit system, dude. Like it's been great to see, man. And while it hasn't turned into wins, hasn't turned into necessarily great football to watch, I think there's a lot to be said when you can convince an entire room of men in an 8-game losing streak to keep playing hard every single play.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't even seen much Eberflus is the problem commentary. I appreciate you entertaining it so eloquently, but like I think saying that Eberflus got chicken shit this year would be a stretch. Like he got nothing, dude. Like you really look at it, he was 3-5 through the first until his defense got traded, right? Like until Roquan and Quinn were gone, he was 3-5, and he had a pretty light stretch coming up, and then the defense could not stop a fucking nosebleed as soon as the offense hit its stride. So I don't know how you can put it on Eberflus. I really don't. It's hard to judge even because, like, yeah, these guys are bought in. Here's what I will say about Eberflus that I really like. It seems like his offseason message about being a teacher, that has come true, right? Like being a teacher first as a coach. Excuse me, but because you're seeing some of these guys like Kyler Gordon, you're seeing some of these guys make strides, right? Like, and are they bought into the system or the team? I'm not 100% sure. It's hard to say that now because you don't have the Marty Bennett's or the Brandon Marshalls or the Jay Cutlers, the guys that are kind of outspoken even without even speaking, right? Like, so it's hard to even, like, Eberflus and Trestman should never even be mentioned in the same fucking sentence, to be honest, because it's nowhere near the same thing. But we don't have any of those high ticket guys that can kind of throw their dick around. We got a lot of cast offs, a lot of guys that are, undrafted free agents or waiver pickups or just guys that are fighting for a fucking job in this league. So they really can't get out of order or out of line, right? Like they have no room to speak. So, and to be honest, that's a big part of why Roquan he was one of the only ones speaking up. One of the only reasons why I think he got plugged, to be honest. But with that being said, I think it's just so hard to judge all aspects of the coaching staff because of how little you really had in terms of the roster. Like you said, like even some of our best players, Mooney was having a good season, like one of the only dependable receivers. Fucking fucks his ankle up. Same thing with Eddie Jackson. Like, and you're seeing guys that like we've never heard of every single week now playing, like guys that got signed from off a practice squad that are now on the 53 and they're starting this week. Like, so I think that players respect coaches that know football, like not trying to be anything, right? Like I feel like Matt Nagy was trying to be something he wasn't, or maybe that's just how he was. And he's just that fucking cringe. Right. But Eberflus just seems like a dude that's just like, yeah, I'm going to come in like business like I treat this like a fucking job. I come in, this is what I need to analyze on tape, this is what I need to tell my guys, this is how I need to tell it to them so they understand, so they're in the best position to make plays, right? And like I think players respect any coach that's going to try to help them get better individually, and I think that does help. So I think coaching staff got to stay in place in all aspects. I've seen some stuff about I don't want to call him Dennis Allen Williams. Yeah. I think it's hard to judge him too, because you forget that whole unit is stripped. He had nothing really in the front seven. Jack Sanborn's a nice surprise. So, I think that's kind of wait and see. I will say though, one thing before we close out, we should probably talk about the rumors with the Big Ten commissioner possibly becoming the new president for the Bears. That is pretty fucking relevant. That came up.
That is it's definitely a relevant point. I'll actually take a little bit of the run on this one because this is one where I've just seen some extreme fucking takes. And like I made a tweet about it. Brennan actually put me in his article about it. I appreciate that, buddy. I made a tweet about it because I kind of had the idea that you're always going to have this segment that's going to love anything the Bears do, and then you're going to have the segment that hate everything the Bears do. I think if you're looking at it from strictly a business perspective, this guy made the Big Ten a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna have your Big Ten loyalists, and I'm a fucking huge Wisconsin Badgers fan. I have been my whole life. I've been watching Big Ten football for a long time. And like I'm not gonna sit here and say that this guy is somebody who I would say has improved necessarily like the game of football for the Big Ten. Cause like, how can you really improve the game? I think anytime you make any change, like within a conference, like you're going to be looking at somebody who's destroying the game or something like that. You know, we see it all the time, even with like our boy, Roger Goodell, you know what I mean? Roger does any little thing as a rule change and we fucking hate it. It's just kind of natural. You know, I'm not going to defend Roger Goodell cause I think a lot of the thing he does is bullshit, but regardless, I think it's a situation that if he's going to be our president CEO, I think he is in tune enough with the game that he could be able to have a little bit of a football operations background. He's somebody that can actually make football decisions because he does know the game. And I think that's the big positive you have to take from something like this is even if we don't hire a guy like Kevin Warren, it shows that we're looking in the direction of people who actually understand football more than they understand fucking salami. And that's a big step in the right fucking direction, man.
Huge step in the right direction, dude.
It really is, man. I think you're going to see a lot of dramatic takes on it. I don't necessarily have like a strong take either way. I'm kind of in the middle on something like this because I'm kind of interested to see like what other names are available. But I feel like we could do a lot worse than Kevin Warren. He's a guy who knows the game. He's a guy who canceled the 2020 season, and that's why a lot of people fucking hate him. You know, whatever. That is what it is. But there are people. What's that?
Didn't they have like a partial season, right?
Yeah, it was, dude. To blame anybody, and this is as far as I'm going to go with this because 2020 was. I don't even want to talk about 2020 because everybody still gets all worked up about it. But like, it's so hard to hold people accountable for how they handled situations at that time because shit was crazy. You know what I mean? It was, and you have to think, man, being the commissioner of a huge conference in college football. You know, you're in charge of all these kids' lives. You know,
there's a lot of liability involved with that. No one really knew how bad the disease was. Let's be real here. The only conference that was all systems fucking go was the SEC. No, like they were like no one else. Otherwise,
all because of this.
Everyone else was altered. If I'm not mistaken, there was a conference that was like mainly West Coast that didn't play at all. So I mean, like, fuck, dude.
And dude, listen, Lucas, we love football just as much as anybody else, obviously. Like, I watch a lot of college football. I know you watch a lot of college football. Our boys watch a lot of college football. Like, Saturdays are my favorite days during the fall because I get to watch ball. And yeah, did it suck missing some games? Did it suck not being able to watch a full season of the Wisconsin Badgers? You're fucking damn right. But like, it was something that like, it's hard to get upset about. It's hard to hold that against somebody. You know what I mean? It's hard to hold that against one individual because the entire world was just fucking running with their hair on fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, listen, that doesn't bother me at all. And to be honest, like you said, it is a bit, you know, I'm already seeing like, oh no, he's just going to be in charge of Arlington and not going to be, no, dude, that's a football guy. You are hiring the commissioner of the Big Ten. If that's what comes to fruition, right? You're not hiring someone that ran a Fortune 500 company, or you're not hiring like someone connected to major contractors. You're hiring a football guy. And to me, that says a lot because things don't always work out. You know, we might be completely wrong, right? Like Flus might be not that good of a coach and Poles might be an incredible GM in 3 years from now, right? Like, but all I like to know is that we have a direct connection to the Big Ten now. Like we're talking 14 teams that, in my opinion, now it's going to be 16 teams with who is it? USC and did Texas join? Or is it USC?
USC and UCLA.
UCLA, right? So you're talking about two more heavy fucking hitters entering the Big Ten. You're talking about far and away the second best conference in football. And now you have connections to all of those coaches, all of those assistants. Think of the information that the scouting departments are going to be able to get. Think of the access they're going to be able to get from these connections. Like it's almost going to be like cheating, but you're going to be able to get a really big advantage in that conference for scouting, everything, dude. Just finding out that information, right? Like you hear about a guy like Jalen Carter right now is slipping and it might slip in the draft because he has character issues, right? You can really go get to the bottom of that and say, you know what? Fuck that, dude. He's going to be the best D lineman coming out in the last 2 years. I found out it was some bullshit that the media hyped up. I'm going to go ahead and grab him, right? Like, I think there's really significant advantages to that. So I kind of hope they hire him. You got to understand, right now, any step is up from Ted Phillips. You're out of your fucking mind if you don't think that.
Dude, I just want a football guy in there. Like, I don't think it's that crazy. Like, yes, you obviously have to be good with your money because the McCaskies obviously put a lot of fucking stock into a guy like Ted Phillips, and that was obviously their big money guy. But like, you need to be able to have a balance. And this is why, and I'm not trying to fucking pull up ancient history, and I know this is immediately going to turn everybody off even bringing up his fucking name, but like, this is why me and you kind of like championed for a guy like Ryan Pace to get that upgrade into that fucking presidential role, because he knows ball. Like, I'll give him that 100%. But like, he also did a lot financially for the Chicago Bears. You know what I mean? Like, there's something to be said about that. And as shitty as it sounds, it's just kind of a natural evil when you have to deal with, ownership of a fucking professional team. They're going to spend more money when they make more money, and they're not going to spend that money when they're not making that money. So as bad as it sounds, because defending billionaires always sucks, like, you have to be able to have a guy who can bring money into the team so we can continue to have our team sign players. It's just kind of that simple. It's basic economics. You know what I mean?
They're not hiring anyone that's fucking me or you. They're hiring a billionaire, or they're hiring someone that's on their path to be a billionaire, right? Like, they're hiring someone pretty established in this field. It's not a fucking open entry where they have people kicking off at Soldier Field to see who the next kicker is going to be. Like, of course it's going to go to someone that's fucking elite. Like, we don't make the fucking world. Let's go get someone that's good, actually, though, right? Like,
and the commissioner of a Power 5 college football conference that'd be pretty impressive. I as shitty as they might be at that job, in somebody else's opinion, that would still be a pretty big get for a team like the Chicago Bears, where, like I said, we've had a guy that really knows fucking pastrami, salami, and every fucking deli meat and leg of lamb that's on the fucking planet. But like, we need a guy that knows football and money.
And he did this as well, I believe, for the Lions, and then he did it for the Vikings. He was the president of ops for the Vikings for like 10 years.
I don't want to speak outside my realm, but I'm also pretty sure he was on those early 2000 Rams in some sort of capacity. So like, he has a football background. Like, there is absolutely zero doubt. And that alone appeals me to him. But with that being said, I'm actually really interested to see the entire process, see what other names pop up. But with that, that's probably the most relevant stuff we have to talk about this week. There's no point even doing predictions at this point. I don't think the Bears are going to be able to win these next two games.
Lose. That's all I gotta say.
All I ask is continue to play hard, continue to play tough, but we all know eventually the game will get away from us. To see Justin Fields gash the Lions would be awesome, but everything besides that, is probably going to be something crazy. But yeah, anyway, this has been Barely There. I know we have not been going every single week. I do want to address the elephant in the room. Me and Lucas, we're kind of going like bi-weekly, kind of when we're feeling really talking ball. Like I said, we have a big off-season episode, potentially 2 episodes kind of coming up. That's going to be a situation where we're really going to jump in. Oh my gosh, the Detroit guy just popped in. I have to do this. Fuck Detroit. I hope we win, Justin, despite you, Don Burr, but thanks for enjoying.
No.
Thanks for joining the show.
Don, please win this game, Don. Talk to Jared for us.
Thanks for joining, though. Appreciate it. We'll take any fans we can get. But me and Lucas are going to be going really whenever there's something relevant to talk about. I might even do some live streaming or spaces in regards to the playoffs, just because I want to talk ball as I watch playoff games. But that's something we'll talk about down the road. But be sure to keep those notifications on to always know when we go live. Sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you listen to your podcast. You'll be the first one to hear when we drop a new episode. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. If you hit that little bell on the YouTube button as well, you'll be able to know when we're going live. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm not asking to be like our crazy friend Alap and put on post notifications because he's insane.
I'll be like Alap.
Yeah. Huge Barely There guy. But definitely a situation where like, we'll be live. We will be bringing out content. I just can't guarantee it's going to be here every single week. But with that, I'm Duke Coughlin. You can follow me at that pod guy Duke. As always, I'm joined by the Ayatollah of Capicola, Lucas Perfetti at Lucas Perfetti 46. We've been barely there, and bear down.
Bear down.